All right, everyone, so welcome to the updated Facebook ads launch strategy lesson. Now, in this lesson, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I recommend that you launch a new store from scratch with Facebook ads, with a new pixel and a new page. And so in the previous Facebook ads blueprint 1.0 module, I have another video called Facebook launch strategy. And in that video, I show you exactly how I launched Flex Posture from scratch inside of Ads Manager. So I just take you inside of Ads Manager and I show you exactly what I was doing. And that is how I explained the launch strategy. And that video, is very helpful for a lot of people. A lot of people got a lot of value out of it, but it also left a lot of people confused and they didn't really know how to follow what I was doing. And so for this updated Facebook ads blueprint 2.0 module, what I wanted to do is separate the case study and the Facebook ads blueprint. And so this Facebook ads blueprint module isn't just case study based. I'm actually teaching you with diagrams, showing you how you launch your store with Facebook. And then what I'm going to do in the next module, which is going to be the case study 2.0 module, is I'm going to show you this applied with a case study, but I'm going to keep the two separate. So in this lesson, it's not going to be case study based. I'm just going to be telling you how I think that you should launch your store based on my experience. So first off, I want to quickly explain a term that I'm going to be using from now on in the rest of the module. And so you just need to be familiar with it. So sandbox campaigns. This is a common term for a campaign that is used for testing. So this is what I'm going to refer to them as, a sandbox campaign. It's just a regular Facebook ads campaign, but that you use for testing. And so what you want to do is you want to test everything in sandbox campaigns first, and then move up your proven audiences and creatives to scaling campaigns. And so the reason why you want to do this is that you want to keep your testing and your scaling separate, right? And this avoids wasting money trying to scale unprofitable audiences or creatives. And so that's the whole idea with sandbox campaigns, is that you test everything in a sandbox campaign first, and then once you find something that works, then you can try to scale it in a different campaign. And so for these sandbox campaigns, you don't have to worry about the optimization, the learning phase, right? Because you're just testing things, you're not spending a lot of money, so you're not getting enough data to optimize anyways. So you don't have to worry about optimization in these campaigns, you just test different audiences, different creatives. And so there's two types of sandbox campaigns that I personally use. Audience sandbox, so this is a campaign to test different audiences, different single interests, and so on. And then creative sandbox, this is just a campaign to test different creatives. This shows the exact launch strategy, and it's just an overview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly give you the overview, and then I'm actually going to go into each step and explain further. So the first step is the initial creative test, and I wrote here that it's optional but recommended. And what you want to do here is you want to test at least 3 creatives in a creative sandbox campaign, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But you want to test at least 3 creatives. There's 3 goals, there's 3 objectives when you're doing so. The first objective is that you want to identify what is the best creative, right? What gets you the most clicks at the cheapest cost? What is going to perform the best when you try to get purchases with the creative? So that's the first goal. You want to identify what the best creative is. The second goal is you want to collect some data. As you run this initial creative test, you're going to get some video viewer data, some engagement on your ads, and that data, eventually, you're going to be able to use that for lookalike audiences. And the third reason is just getting engagement and social proof on your ad. If you get a bit of engagement and social proof from this initial creative test, you can retain that engagement and social proof when you switch to the next phase, which is initial data collection. So that's the first step. It's optional but recommended. If you skip this, you can just make one ad and then go straight to here, right? You just make one ad and then you just go right to the initial data collection step. So the next step is initial data collection. So this is, you've identified your top creative if you did this step, and then what you want to do is you want to use that creative, that ad, and you want to test 10 single interests in an audience sandbox campaign, right? So an audience sandbox campaign is just a campaign to test different audiences. So what you want to do is you want to test 10 single interests in a campaign like this, and you also want to test your 95% video viewers lookalike audiences as soon as you have enough data to do so. And so these are 2 different campaigns here. The first one is 10 single interests, and the next one is just 95% video viewers lookalikes in another campaign. And I'm going to explain this further in a second. And for this phase here, you only want to use the top creative from your initial test, right? And if you skip the initial test, well, you only have 1 creative anyways. Now, the next step after this initial data collection is data-driven targeting. So you've collected some data at this point. You should have some insights on who your best audience to target is, who the best interests are, and you also have more data for lookalikes. And so this is when you can really focus in your targeting at this point. And this is when usually you might go from losing money to break even, or from break even to profitable. And so data-driven targeting, you want to narrow down the top interests that you've identified in this phase here, You want to narrow them down by the best age, gender, country. You also want to launch new interests similar to the top ones, right? Based on what worked in your initial 10, like if you tested 10 interests, 2 of them did really well, 8 of them flopped, you want to launch new interests similar to the 2 that did really well. And then you also want to launch new lookalike audiences, and you want to launch a new campaign for each lookalike audience type once you have enough data. And I wrote here, over 500 events is what I'd recommend. So for example, if you want to make an add to cart lookalike, I'd recommend waiting until you have 500 add to carts. Once you reach that, you can launch a new campaign for add to cart lookalikes. And you want to do this for each lookalike type once you have enough data. And so this is the data-driven targeting phase. This is once you really start picking up, this is when the results start really picking up, and you should be at least at break even ideally in this phase. And then the last phase here is the creative optimization phase. And I wrote here optional if you're already profitable, but this is where you can really optimize your campaigns and your ads and really improve your return on ad spend by testing new creatives and by finding what messaging works with your audience, what kind of offer works, and how do you figuring out the creative that gets you the highest click-through rate, that gets you the highest relevance. And once you do this is going to reduce your ad costs in the auction. And so this is the last step. Once you've identified your best audiences with this data-driven targeting phase, you just want to test a lot of different creatives in your creative sandbox campaign with your best audiences to lower costs. And I quickly wrote the hierarchy of testing here. These are the things that you should prioritize. So what's most important to test in an ad? The most important is the full video angle, right? Like the whole video. Changing the whole video is going to make the biggest difference. Now the next thing that's going to make the biggest difference is changing just the first 3 seconds. This is what I call the scroll stopper. Just changing this is going to make a really big difference. Now after this, I put the ad copy. Ad copy also makes a very big difference. And lastly, the thumbnail. And so that's an overview of the launch strategy, right? It's not that complicated. It's just really these steps, right? Initial creative test, this is optional, but this gives you the highest chance of success. Then you want to collect data, use that data to narrow down your targeting, and then figure out what creative works with that targeting. All right, so now I want to dive into each step more in depth. So the first step is the initial creative test. And I actually made a diagram here showing you exactly how you want to set up this campaign. And so the campaign name is just Creative Sandbox. I already explained why I call this a sandbox campaign. And now for the campaign objective, in the past, what I used to recommend for testing creatives is PPE, page post engagement. However, as of late, I've noticed that PPE is getting a lot of low quality traffic. For example, you'll get a ton of link clicks, but not as many content views because people don't even bother to load the whole page and stuff. So you get a lot of junk traffic with PPE campaigns. And so what I've been testing lately instead for creative sandbox campaigns is a website conversions campaign optimizing for view content, so for VC. And so you just create a website conversions campaign, and then at the ad set level, it asks you to select your optimization event. You want to select view content. And so this is what I've been using for creative sandbox campaigns, website conversions, view content. Now, for the budget, you want to use the number of test ad sets times $10 to $20. And so if you're testing 3 ad sets, like in this scenario here, your budget would be $30 to $60. And for most people, I'd recommend $10 per ad set. So 3 ad sets, $30 campaign budget. That's enough to get enough testing data for these creatives. And so for the ad sets, you want 3 identical ad sets. And so you can just create this first ad set here and then duplicate it twice to get the ad set number 2 and number 3. And also you can test more than 3 creatives, right? If you want to test 5 creatives, you can have 5 identical ad sets. And then the budget would just be 5 times 10. And so for the ad sets, the targeting that you want to set is as follows. So you want to use the T4 countries. The T4 countries is the top 4 countries for e-commerce. So the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. So these are the countries that you want to target for this creative sandbox. Now, if you're selling a general product, so if, for example, it's a posture corrector, and you know that's a product that doesn't really have any interest that you can target. And so in this case, don't do any detailed targeting. Just set these countries, leave the age and the gender as broad as possible, and then let Facebook take care of everything for you. So just leave it as broad as possible, and that's all you need to do. Now, if it's a niche product, so for example, if you're selling some dog product or something, then you want to stack 3 to 5 broad niche interests. And so you could stack 3 to 5, in the detailed targeting, you can add 3 to 5 broad niche interests related to dogs in that case. But for me, I focus mainly on general products that have a large target market. And so in most cases, I do no detailed targeting, and I just select these countries. And then for placements, you just want to do automatic placements. Just leave that as automatic placements. And then another important thing for your ad sets is you need to set a spend limit. And this is because of campaign budget optimization. If you don't set a spend limit, campaign budget optimization will often spend all the budget just towards one of the ad sets that it thinks will do better. But the goal here is for us to get test data on each of these creatives, right? We want to see which one of these ads is going to perform best. And so we want to force at least a little bit of spend into each ad set. And that's why we're going to put a minimum spend limit. And so you want to put a minimum spend limit of half of your budget per ad set. And so if you did $10 per ad set, you want to set a spend limit of $5. If you did $20 per ad set, you want to set a spend limit of $10 per ad set. And like I said, this will just force the ad set to spend a little bit so that you at least get some testing data for all of your creatives here. Now, the last step is the ads. So you have your 3 identical ad sets. Now you want to put one different ad in each ad set. And you only want to change one variable at a time. So for example, if the variable that you were changing is the actual video or the image ad, then the first ad would have the first video or image, the second ad would have the second video or image, and the third ad would have the third video or image, and then everything else would be identical. So the headline, the ad text, the thumbnail, everything else identical. The only thing that's different is the first video or image. Now you can do the same thing, keeping the video or image constant and only changing the ad text, right? The important thing is that you only want to change one variable at a time so that you can identify what was the cause of the change in performance. If you change multiple variables at once, it's impossible to identify what caused the change. And so that's how you want to set up your initial creative test. And this is how you set up creative sandbox campaigns in general. And I'm going to talk about this more in depth in the next lesson, which is the creative optimization lesson. Just last thing here, how you want to run this, how you want to optimize this is each ad set, after it gets 1,000 impressions, that shouldn't cost a lot. It should cost you under $10 to get 1,000 impressions if you're doing a website conversions VC campaign. And so you want to pause each ad set after it gets 1,000 impressions. You can set an automated rule to do this. And once again, I'm going to show you this in the next lesson, the creative optimization lesson. And so you want to set an automated rule to automatically pause your ad sets once they get 1,000 impressions inside of your creative sandbox campaigns. And so once all ad sets are paused, you can just compare the data, see which performed best, right? Which drove the most actions taken on your website. That's the most important thing, is actions taken on your website. And so the important metrics to look at is the CTR link click, right? How many people clicked through on our ad. Usually the ad with the highest CTR link click is going to be the best ad, although that is not always the case, because you also need to look at the cost per unique add to cart. So CTR link click is important. You want to look at CTR link click, cost per unique content view, and also the cost per unique add to cart. Based on that, make a decision on which ad is probably going to perform the best. And if you're not sure, you can select, the top 2 instead of just picking one. And once again, I'm going to show you all of this in the next lesson, which is the creative optimization lesson. All right, so after the initial creative test, that's what I just covered. The next step is the initial data collection. And there's 2 steps to this. There's the 10 single interests, and there's the 95% video viewers, lookalike audiences. And so what comes first here depends on how fast you get data for 95% video viewers. As soon as you have over 2,000 95% video viewers, I'd recommend launching the lookalikes right away. But in some cases, you'll have to launch the 10 single interests in order to get that many 95% video viewers. And so whichever comes first is up to you. I'm just going to start with the single interests. So this is what you want to set up your single interest data collection campaign as. So campaign, the name is just interest sandbox, right? It's just a sandbox campaign to test different interests. The optimization goal should be website conversions, purchase. So you want to select purchase as the goal at the ad set level. The budget here should be the number of test ad sets times $10 to $50. So, the amount you want to spend per ad set really depends on how fast you want to collect data, how much budget you have. If you have a lot of budget and you want to collect data fast, then you want to do $50 per test interest in this campaign. If you have a small budget, then you want to do $10 per ad set. And so in this example here, I have 10 ad sets, right? So ad set number 1, ad set number 2, and then ... just because I didn't want to put every single one on the graph, but just picture this just goes on. It's the same idea. It just goes on all the way to ad set number 10. And so for each ad set, you want to target the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, the top 4 countries. And the targeting here is the first single interest, right? So each one of these has a different interest. And then everything else is the same. The only thing that changes here is the interest. So you can set up this ad set once, duplicate it 9 times, and then just change the interest for all the other 9 ad sets. And so first single interest here, you want to narrow down to the age and gender if you're 100% sure, otherwise leave it broad. So for example, if you know that it's a product that's only for men or only for women, then you can select that gender. If you know that it's a specific age range and there's no way that, there's no way that anyone else would buy it, then you can narrow it down to that. But if you aren't sure, just leave it broad, and then Facebook will optimize for you. Automatic placements, you want to just do automatic placements, let Facebook figure that out for you. One-day click optimization if your selling price is under $50. Otherwise, I'd recommend just the default 7-day click, 1-day view. But I almost always use 1-day click optimization for my website conversions purchase campaigns. And then spend limits, the same thing here. You want to put half of your budget per ad set as a spend limit. So if your budget per ad set is $10, you want to put a $5 minimum spend limit. If your budget per ad set is $50, you want to put a $25 min spend limit. This is just to ensure that every ad set that you're testing gets at least a bit of spend and at least a bit of test data, right? Because otherwise, like I explained before with CBO, sometimes if you don't put your spend limits, it just won't spend at all towards some ad sets. And so that's how you want to set up this interest sandbox campaign, just 10 different single interests. Everything else is the same. And then the same ad for each one of the ad sets, which is just your winning ad from the initial test, right? Whichever ad performed best in your initial test, that's all you want to put in these ad sets. If you tested like 5 ads at the start and 2 of them did really well, you can put 2 ads per ad set. That works fine too. But for this example, I just said 1 ad per ad set and the winning creative from the initial test. Now, in terms of optimizing this campaign, what do you do once you launch it, right? So what you want to do is you want to use your cost per purchase as the main metric. And I've already talked about this in the reading data lesson, so you should know what your KPIs are for cost per purchase. And so the way that I'd recommend you optimize this is, for example, if for a specific ad set, let's say ad set number 1 has 0 purchases and has spent over the break-even cost per purchase, you can find your break-even cost per purchase on the KPI sheet. So if it's spent above that amount and it has 0 purchases, that's probably not a good ad set, and so you could pause that. You could pause that ad set. And I wrote here, you can do the same thing with add to cart if you're trying to save budget. It's just a little bit less reliable, right? So if the amount of add to cart is equal to 0 and your ad spend is above the break-even cost per add to cart, you can also find that on the spreadsheet, the KPI spreadsheet that I talked about in the reading data lesson. Then you pause the ad set, right? That would allow you to pause ad sets faster, but you might miss out on some good audiences doing that by pausing ad sets too fast. So it's up to you, but this is what I'd recommend for most people. If the number of purchases is 0 and it's spent over the break-even cost per purchase, pause that ad set. Now, the second step of the initial data collection is the 95% video viewers lookalikes. And like I said, this isn't necessarily the second step. You can do this before single interest if you want. It doesn't really matter. You want to do this as soon as you reach over 2,000 95% video viewers on your best creative. And you can check this using the ads manager columns. You pull up the 95% video viewers lookalikes columns. You can go to your creative breakdown and see how many 95% video viewers you have for each creative. And so once you reach this amount of video viewers, this amount of 95% video viewers, you want to create the 95% video viewers lookalike audiences. And so this is how you want to set this up. You want to create the 95% video viewers lookalike for these top 4 countries together. So when you go to creating your lookalike audience, you want to select all 4 of these countries together, and then you want to create it in 5 segments. So 1%, 1 to 2%, and then I put 3 dots here because I didn't want to write the whole thing out, but 2 to 3%, 3 to 4%, and then all the way to 4 to 5%. And then in terms of setting up this campaign, you just want one campaign here. The budget is $100 to $250. This depends on how much budget you have. That's what I'd recommend, $100 to $250. So you have 5 ad sets in here. Each ad set is just selecting that one lookalike audience in custom audience, and then you just leave everything else broad, right? So for the 95% video viewers 1% ad set, you just select that lookalike audience in the custom audience section, and then you leave everything else broad. Automatic placements, 1-day click optimization if your selling price is under $50. Otherwise, just leave it to the default 7-day click, 1-day view. And the same thing for each other one of these ad sets, right? The only thing that's changing is the custom audience. 1%, 1 to 2%, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And then with this campaign here, you don't need to set any ad set spend limits. I haven't found that to be necessary. And so you just want to set this up, 5 ad sets, 1 campaign. Each ad set has one ad inside of it, which is the winning creative from your initial test. And if you had multiple winning creatives, you can put 2 to 3 ads per ad set in here as well. And so you want to launch this campaign like this and just let it run. So you want to let this campaign optimize for, you don't want to pause any ad sets, because campaign budget optimization, that's the point of it, is automatically going to find the best ad sets within the campaign to target. So you don't need to pause any ad sets. You just need to let Facebook get some data and optimize, and over time it'll automatically decide if it should spend towards, a bad ad set or not. And so just let it optimize. Don't pause ad sets. Usually it'll start slow and it'll optimize on day 2 or 3. However, if your campaign spend overall is over 2x your break-even cost per purchase, and you don't have a single purchase, that probably means that your ads aren't good or something isn't working in your funnel. And so you should just pause the campaign to avoid wasting money, right? After spending 2x your break-even cost per purchase, you should at least have a purchase, right? That would still mean you're losing money, but at least it shows that it's converting a bit. So if you spend over 2x your break-even cost per purchase, just pause the entire campaign. Otherwise, just let it optimize, and usually it starts slow and it'll optimize after day 2 or 3. All right, so now I want to do a quick troubleshooting checkpoint, because at this point, if you did the initial creative test and you tested 3 or more good creatives, and you also did the 95% video viewers and the 10 single interests or more, if you've done all of this and you haven't identified any profitable audiences, the problem is most likely your offer. There's probably something wrong with your, the product that you're selling, or your website, or your pricing, or there's something that's not going right, because after testing all of this, you should at least be starting to get onto something. And if you aren't, there's most likely a problem with your offer. And so what I'd recommend doing, if at this point you haven't identified anything that's working, I'd recommend identifying where the drop-off is happening in your funnel and then trying to fix it before launching new ads, right? And so you can view the reading data lesson in this module, and I explain at the end of that lesson exactly how to troubleshoot your funnel when it's not working. And so that's what you need to do at this point if nothing is working, because if you keep spending on testing more audiences at this point, you're probably going to lose money. And so that's the last thing that you want to do at this point, is just keep testing more audiences and doing more of the same and expecting different results. And if you feel like there's nothing left to improve at this point, you might as well just consider switching products and starting over, right? But in most cases, there's always things to improve. So just get creative and identify where the drop-off is happening and fix it before spending more money on testing new audiences. So I talked about the initial creative test. I just talked about the initial data collection. Now right here in between these two is where you do the troubleshooting checkpoint, right? At this point, you should have some ad sets that are at least breaking even or getting some sales, right? If you don't, there's a problem with your offer, with your funnel, and you need to go back to the drawing board, fix it, troubleshoot it before moving on to the next step. Because if you move on to this next step without making sure that your funnel actually converts, then you might actually start, wasting a lot of money. And so that's why it's important. But once you get to this point, initial data collection, the next step is the data-driven targeting. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. So what you want to do for the data-driven targeting phase is you want to keep testing interest audiences in your interest sandbox campaign, right? So I showed you how to structure an interest sandbox to test your first 10 single interests. Well, as you start pausing the bad interests, what you want to do is you want to replace them with new interests similar to the ones that are doing well, right? So if you tested 10 interests, only 3 of them did well, 7 of them flopped, test more interests similar to the 3 that did well. You also want to launch new interests, narrowing down the interests that are currently working, right? So if you found an interest that's working pretty well, but then you break it down and you find that there's a segment that is doing even better and that has statistically significant data telling you that you should narrow to that, then you can do that as well, right? And so this is what you want to do for interest in this phase. Is you want to keep testing new interests similar to what's working and also narrow down your best interest to see if you can improve the performance even more. As I mentioned before, my favorite breakdowns are age range, country, and also placement is also very useful. And your goal here with this interest sandbox campaign is to keep testing new interest audiences until you have 5 or more consistently profitable interest audiences, right? So you want to keep testing and pausing the bad ones and launching new interests until you have 5 ad sets that are consistently profitable. And so by consistently profitable, I mean over at least 3 days and 10 or more purchases, right? So until you get to this point where you have 5 or more consistently profitable interest audiences, I wouldn't try to actually scale this vertically. In other words, increase the campaign budget. Instead, I would just try to keep finding similar audiences that you can target until you have at least 5 consistently profitable interest audiences. Once you get to that point, you're ready for the top interest scaling method that I teach, and this is going to be talked about in the later lessons in this module. Now, the data-driven targeting phase also has a component with lookalike audiences, right? So at this point, you have a lot more data than before. At this point, the only lookalike you've launched is the 95% video viewers lookalike, but there's a lot better lookalike audiences that you can build based on the new data that you're getting from, testing interests, from running the 95% video viewers lookalikes. You have a lot more data now, and so you should launch new lookalikes with the new data that you have. And so I wrote here, launch a new campaign for each lookalike audience type once you get enough events. So you need at least 500 events is what I'd recommend for a new lookalike. And so there's a ton of different lookalike audience types, right? There's 95% video viewers, website visitors, visitors by time spent, added to cart, initiated checkout, people who engage with you on Facebook. As soon as you get over 500 events for one of these lookalike audience types, you want to launch it in a new campaign. You want to launch it the exact same way that I showed the 95% video viewers lookalikes being launched earlier. It's the exact same structure. It's a new campaign, 5 ad sets, 5 equal segments, right? 1%, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And so you want to launch these new lookalikes as soon as you have enough data, because these audiences do really, really well. And this will also help you collect more data, right? It's like a snowball effect. You launch a new lookalike, it helps you collect more data, which then you can launch more new lookalikes, which helps you collect more data, and so on. And like I said, for lookalike audience campaigns with CBO, you just want to let it optimize. Don't pause any ad sets. It usually starts slow and optimizes on day 2 or 3. However, if your campaign spend is over 2x the break-even cost per purchase and you don't have a single purchase, then you just want to pause the entire campaign. Once you find 2 to 3 consistently profitable lookalike audience types, this is when you're ready for super lookalike audience scaling. And I'm going to teach this later on in the module as well. All right, so I just explained the data-driven targeting phase. So this is after the initial data collection, when you want to narrow down your top interests. You want to launch new interests similar to the top ones. Launch new campaigns for each lookalike audience type, right? You just want to keep using your data to target more effectively. And ideally, at this point, you should be at break-even or profitable, right? Because you have a lot of data. You're really narrowing down on your target audience. And so, it's really possible to be profitable at this point and to be very profitable. And so the next step is creative optimization. And that's why I wrote optional if already profitable. But I would highly, highly recommend that you do this, because after the data-driven targeting phase, this is when you've identified your top audiences to target. You have good audiences to target. And so if it's not working as well as you'd like to, the problem isn't the audiences that you're targeting most likely. The problem is your creatives. And so what you want to do is you want to use the top audiences from this phase here to test new creatives and to optimize your creatives. And so you want to do this using creative sandbox campaigns, the same way that I showed you the initial data collection test. You want to set up a creative sandbox campaign and target your best audiences, your best lookalike audiences, for instance, and then just test new creatives and see what gets you the lowest costs for, the cost per unique view content, cost per unique add to cart. And then this will dramatically lower your ad costs. So just going a little bit more in depth into the creative optimization phase. So this doesn't necessarily come after the previous step. And this is really important. I know that in the graph, I showed that the creative optimization is the last step, but you can start optimizing creatives right away. And as a matter of fact, you should if you want to be profitable as soon as possible, right? Because testing creatives makes the biggest difference on Facebook ads. And so, you should start optimizing creatives as soon as you can. Once you start identifying some audiences that are doing well for you, you want to test new creatives with those audiences inside of a creative sandbox campaign, the same way that I showed you with the initial creative test, right? You want to do that exact same setup with your top audiences identified so far to see which creatives resonate, what messaging resonates, what gets you the best click-through rates, and so on. And so you want to test as much as possible. This is the key to increasing estimated action rates and relevance, which are major auction factors. I've already covered this. And once you find a creative that performs better than your current best, you want to duplicate it into your website conversions purchase campaigns, right? So once you find a new creative that's performing better than the current ones you have, or that's performing just as well as the current one you have, you want to add that new creative into all your campaigns that are meant to get sales, right? So your website conversion purchase campaigns. And so that's the idea with creative optimization. You want to test a lot of creatives in the sandbox campaigns and then take the best ones, add them to your purchase campaigns. All right, everyone, so that is it for this lesson about my updated Facebook ads launch strategy. I hope you enjoyed it. And in the next lesson, I'm going to be talking more about creative optimization. And I'm actually going to show you some examples inside of my ads manager of sandbox campaigns, like I've been referring to this whole lesson. So hopefully that'll clear things up. And hopefully this whole module is going to make a lot more sense when you watch the case study 2.0 module, where I show you this Facebook ads blueprint applied in practice in a case study. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next lesson.